Thank you. Well, where were you on the night of January 20th, 1969 at about 5 p.m.? How about that evening when Neil Armstrong stepped out on the surface of the moon? Were you glued to the TV like I was, in that grainy black and white image? It's incredible to think that it was only 66 years from man's first powered flight to the date of the moon landing, and only 12 years from the time of the Sputnik launch in '57 to the moon landing. That's a very incredible thing. So this is the 50th anniversary of the year of the successful Apollo 11 landing, and we're paying special tribute to one of mankind's most significant accomplishments. And our own Wayne Ottinger played a leading role in that mission. It turns out that he and I were both at the Manned Space Center in Houston, Texas in 1966. I was a summer intern during that time, working on how to deal with the newly discovered radiation belts that the astronauts were going to have to fly through on the way to the moon. But by that time, Wayne had already distinguished himself and was managing and delivering the Apollo lunar landing research vehicle as a NASA project engineer. That summer, he was there managing and testing the lunar module vehicle and the technical director for Bell Aerosystems. His responsibility was really intensive. It was a 24/7 operation, and he says that Neil Armstrong received his LLTV training only 1 month before Apollo 11 launch in July. Well, backing up a little bit, Wayne's mechanical and aerospace engineering career started in 1953 flight testing the new lightweight jet engine for supersonic military aircraft. He then joined NASA's Flight Research Center at Edwards Air Force Base as the flight operations engineer responsible for the X-15, that 60,000-pound thrust rocket engine. That role earned him a promotion to project engineer with a small group of 8 engineers working on the concept on how to achieve lunar landing. That was a full year before President Kennedy's Apollo speech in September of '62. By '63, he was the NASA project engineer working with Bell Aerosystems in Niagara Falls to design and fabricate the lunar landing research vehicle. And after 3 years of directing that flight research training, which became the Apollo lunar mission. And then that included the fly-by-wire industry. So he switched hats and left NASA to join Bell Aerosystems as the technical director for upgrading the LLRV design with the lunar module hardware. And he's also done work in engineering energy and engineering conversion. So Wayne will give his Apollo 11 briefing the week of July 13th at the Wings Over the Rockies Museum in Denver at their Apollo Palooza 50th celebration of the Apollo 11 landing. A few Apollo astronauts and celebrities, I think I heard the name Harrison Ford, will be there. So we're all invited to come and listen to that then. But right now, we're going to get to hear him talk to us, and maybe he'll tell us why he got the name Mr. X when he transferred from NASA to Bell Aerospace Systems. Wayne, thank you very much.
Let's see if I can get this up here. I've got it all memorized, but I'd better use this as so you can follow along with me. Boy, good sound communication there. 40 years after Neil and Buzz landed on the moon, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbital mission used a much better camera, and an Australian cleverly matched the footage from that mission to the old footage, which is shown on the next slide with the original soundtrack.
Eagle looking great, your go. Altitude 1600. 1400 feet, still looking very good. Roger, 12.
Amazing.
Eagle looking great, your go. Altitude 1600. 1400 feet, still looking very good. Roger, 1202, we copy it. 35 degrees. 35 degrees, 750, coming down to 23. 700 feet, 21 down, 33 degrees. 100 feet, down at 19. 540 feet, down at 30, down at 15. At 400 feet, down at 9. Gate forward. 1050 feet, down at 4. 33 and a half down. They're pegged on horizontal velocity. 300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward. Hold up. On 1.5 down. 70. Got the shadow out there. 50 down at 19 forward. Altitude, velocity, light. 3.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. Within 60 feet. 6.5 down. 5.5 down. 9 forward. Good. Within 20 feet. 100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 5%. 185. Okay, 75 feet. Car's looking good, down a half. 6 forward. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Great shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drifting to the right a little. 20, down a half. 30 seconds. Forward, just. Good. Okay. Contact light.
Amazing to see the Apollo 11 descent module, which launched the crew back home, sitting there 40 years later, a tribute to NASA's determination. Here's the actual data from Apollo 11 showing Neil's ability to dodge the boulders and craters as he landed with only about 23 seconds of fuel remaining. Let's step back and put that first landing into perspective. My first flight in 1949 was only 46 years after the Wright brothers' first flight. Looks like I was very fortunate to be alive during these times of spectacular accomplishments for human exploration. If you notice over here in the Sputnik race, it was only 12 years from Sputnik, first satellite, to getting onto the moon. 12 years. Neil's foreword for our NASA LLRV monograph that I co-authored describes the challenges we faced as we started early in 1961 on how to figure out how to make a lunar approach and landing before the decision was made, resulting in a lunar module. By the way, Neil tagged the title to this monograph, Unconventional, Contrary, and Ugly. Our flight research task at NASA Edwards was key to supporting the design and development of the overall strategy for Apollo. Astronaut participation led by Neil Armstrong ensured the capability of providing manual landing systems and training in opposition to providing only the fully automatic capability. And by the way, that is shown with that dotted line. That would have been the automatic landing, which did not have the resolution to understand where the boulders and craters were. Neil's statement, wrapping up the forward, has been endorsed by all of the other 5 commanders who had to depend on the manual controls for safe landings enabled by earthbound free flight training each received prior to launch. This reflection on the historical drivers making the Apollo landing possible by innovative use of early computer technology and the space race as a catalyst is an important quote from the monograph. I was fortunate to join the small NASA team at Edwards Air Force Base in 1962 in their first year of struggling with how to replicate the lunar environment here on the Earth to develop landing techniques, including training for astronauts, flying at large pitch and roll angles, and much longer translation times compared to the helicopters. A major LLRV legacy was that it was the first aircraft to fly in all 3 axes, pitch, roll, and yaw, with the analog dual-channel fly-by-wire with no hydraulic or mechanical backup, a VTOL type as well. Seems like yesterday, 70 years ago, I was flying this airplane in high school flying club. It's a long time ago. About 3 decades of my aerospace experience was an opportune time just before the space program really took off. As the Cold War heated up after World War II, our space program was greatly stimulated by Russia's launch of the first satellite Sputnik on 10/4/57. U.S. aviation progress after the war brought in the jet age, transforming both military and civilian applications while providing significant growth in employment and economic benefits. My next 3 decades were carried on with a number of advanced technology fields, and culminating in my NASA consulting in the 2008 to 2010 Constellation New lunar lander Altair.
In the high desert of California, NASA tests an experimental rocket plane, the X-15. They want to put a man into space, and they're in a hurry.
Rockets were powering aircraft to higher and higher speeds. The X-15 had enough energy to zoom to altitudes above the atmosphere.
The X-15 flies so high, pilots experience weightlessness and look out into the darkness of space. But even at 600,000 horsepower, it would need to fly 4 times its top speed to put a man into orbit. The Soviet Union holds an early lead in the space race, launching the first unmanned satellite to orbit the Earth.
On October the 4th, 1957, when Sputnik went into orbit, people were so upset. They said, these people can't build a refrigerator. How can they get into orbit? How does this happen?
To beat the Soviets, NASA must launch a man into Earth orbit. Only rockets can go fast enough, more than 17,000 miles per hour. They call the program Project Mercury, and rally a team of determined young scientists and engineers to figure out how to fly a military missile with a man on top.
Most of us came in from aircraft flight test. We knew nothing about rocketry, we knew nothing about spacecraft, we knew nothing about orbits.
Gene Kranz joins the flight directors team in NASA's earliest days.
So it was a question of learning to drink from a fire hose. We had to learn all about trajectories. I'd never heard the term retrofire, coming on down from orbit, getting the spacecraft back home.
This comparison illustrates the much larger vehicle pitch attitudes compared to a helicopter required in a typical braking maneuver on the moon as preparation for a vertical landing. Astronauts have to be trained to make safe landings where no aerodynamic forces are available in a vacuum. If you'll notice the reaction control on the actual landing footage that we had on the soundtrack in the early beginning of this presentation, you can notice the similarity between our LLTV here, which is, I'm just showing the last part of a demonstration. It's the only footage we ever had with the soundtrack.
Switch is on, camera's on. Yeah, I'm showing a crosswind here. Some magnitude. It's coming forward now. Showing 32%. Okay, everything looks good. All of that looks good. You can move on. He's on. He's yellow there. Okay. This starts below 30. Send rate to 10. Altitude's 200. That's clear. Okay. This dropping back to 50. Altitude's approaching 100. 1 minute to 50%. Yep. This is rate to 4. Altitude 100, this is rate to 4, airspeed 5.
Here's my best keepsake photo from 2008 to 2010 NASA Consulting. And that's Neil on my right, and Gene Cernan, last man on the moon, on my left. Or no, the other way around. Anyway, here we go with Apollo-Palooza coming up the week of July 13th through the 20th. So we've already got Jack Schmidt, the geologist on the last mission, and Gene Kranz coming. And then down here, we've got Vance Brand next to me here. And we hope to get another 2 or 3 Apollo astronauts. And here's the Constellation Altair lunar lander design that was 10 foot higher than the lunar module in Apollo. And our LLTV was 10 foot higher, half of the Apollo, and our proposed trainer for the Altair was going to be about 15 feet high. Now, here's Bob Hoover and Harrison Ford and Sean Tucker summing up aviation history for a 1-minute clip. Bob Hoover was many regarded as the best pilot ever lived. he spent 3 years as a German POW. I used to take my kids to see his air shows at Edwards all the time. And let's play this. He was 91 years old in this clip and died the next year in 2017 at age 92.
Dreams come true here in America. We have more freedoms to fly than anywhere else in the world. We just got to figure out a way how to get it to that next generation.
Well, the benefits, that have accrued to this country from aviation from wartime and peacetime are just not well understood anymore. Military aviation, civil aviation, commercial guys, little private pilots, if we don't all work together, we're going to lose it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's a camaraderie among aviators all over the world. That's what all of us as aviators have enjoyed so much. It's part of our good life, and it is a good life because I've not met very many people that were flying that I didn't immediately like.
Okay, here's him right after the Apollo 11 crew got out of quarantine back in September at their annual commission. And I've shortened this clip. He met Charles Lindbergh in Germany at an air show. And so his introduction of that, I
was
trimmed
the
it back.
president of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots in '69, and I talked to him about the organization. I said, look, now that I have announced that the Apollo 11 crew are going to be here, there are going to be 1,000 people out that door looking for the Apollo 11 crew. Why don't you let me sneak you in? You can walk in there and nobody will ever. Nobody recognized him. And he was sitting there, and they came up and all wanted Neil's signature and picture taken.
That's Bob's wife,
And
Indy
Lindbergh
Crane.
leaned across Colleen and said, Neil, you're going to regret signing these autographs. And Neil just turned to him and politely said, sir, every pilot in this room has accepted the risks that I have taken. If they want my autograph or my picture, that is the very least I can do. And when I brought Lindbergh on stage, I have never seen such pandemonium in my life. The applause was a standing ovation that my gavel wouldn't get them to stop. They just kept screaming and yelling, and it was the biggest night of his life. And he told me that later. That photograph hit the front page of every paper in the world, I think, and the whole world had a chance to see him after all those many years. It was a great evening.
General Barry at Wings over the Rockies there in Denver has been using virtual reality to inspire young Eagles as they're learning how to fly, introduce aerobatic flying, as well as helicopters and skydiving. The Wings mission is to help mitigate the future critical shortage of aviation and aerospace workers already here. My son has the Reality Garage virtual reality business here on the Pearl Street Mall in Boulder. And he was up till midnight trying to get this clip ready for me because he's in the final stages of developing what we're going to be sending out to 3 of the Apollo astronauts and try and get them to help us recruit young people into an aviation career.
Up from dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Base shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right level. 6, down a half. 30 seconds forward. Just. Okay. Contact light. Okay. Within 60, 6.5 down. 5.5.
Well, welcome to the moon. My name is Major General John Barry, United States Air Force, retired. And what we're demonstrating here today is this incredible technology, it's virtual reality, and being able to tell stories. And we want to invite you to be able to use this amazing technique to be able to explain your stories and be part of this amazing celebration at the 50-year anniversary of the first man on the moon. So as you see the background and all of the capabilities we have, I think you can be excited about the fact that this technology will animate the ability of your sense of the story that you can tell, and we're excited about doing it. And why? Because we want to excite young people, the generation today, to be able to see the art of the possible of what went on and what can go on, you know, insofar as aerospace is concerned. So we're really excited about inviting you to be part of this experiment, to be able to get the word out and be able to, you know, in perpetuity celebrate this amazing story of going to the moon and coming back. So let's just kind of reminisce a little bit. We've had 2 generations now, which is hard to believe, since President Kennedy made his amazing challenge where he said that before the decade is out, we would take a man to the moon and return him safely. Now, the total Apollo program was 12 years, 9 missions, 34 astronauts were involved. We're talking about 500,000 people that were involved on the ground, scientists, engineers, support personnel, all of that, resulted in the fact that 12 Americans walked on the moon. Now, as part of the amazing different parts and challenges of doing all that, we know that being able to land on the moon and be able to lift off the moon was something that certainly had to be worked. 1/6 the gravity of the planet Earth is on the moon, and we are going to talk about a story now about vehicles. We had research vehicles and training vehicles, and ended up being the lunar lander module that have finally allowed our astronauts to land and take off from the moon. So we're gifted and honored to have Wayne Ottinger here with us today, who's a NASA engineer, and he's going to tell his story, just like we're going to invite you to tell your stories in this amazing technology. So Wayne, well, one of those stories you told me was about Neil Armstrong and how he ejected from one of the research vehicles.
Yes. Well, 50 years ago, last May, I was sitting next to him as he had ejected, and he didn't have a mark on him, as opposed to what First Man showed him.
Oh, the movie showed?
Bruce.
Yeah.
But
so how many G's?
20 G's.
20 G's.
On the ejection seat rocket for half a second.
Yeah.
And so I should mention that General Barry was commander at Luke Air Force Base when Bob Hoover, at age 85, made his last air show demonstration doing aerobatics. He decided that he had lost his touch and didn't want to die in the cockpit. And he quit on that time, and John Barry remembers that because he was commander at Luke at that time. And then 7 years later, Bob died. But I'm amazed that he was flying aerobatics at the same age I am. And then I've got one slide here for Q&A, and that talks about ejection seats, but I'll defer that and just leave that up in case somebody wants to question on the ejection seats. So, well, we had 3 ejections, and the first 2 were human errors, and they replaced those people responsible, gave them other assignments, and they brought down 20, 25 people from mission control, or brought them up to Ellington, which was 8 miles north of the main NASA facility there. And every day they practiced managing the flight operations, and they got their message a little too late on the importance. They even brought in an Air Force mobile weathering monitoring thing to avoid the wind shear that they lost the first trainer on. And it was a very lightweight ejection seat, very challenging, and required customized seat cushions for every pilot that ever flew it, whether they were astronauts or not. And they had to get weighed every few months because it changed the cushion design.
So Wayne, we hate to bring this to a close. You are right on time and much appreciated. And it was an extraordinary story and an extraordinary telling of it. Again, this was one of the technological achievements of mankind. You played a pivotal role and a key element of that. We're honored to have you as a member of our club. We are grateful and hope that everyone can enjoy the events that will be going on at Wings Over the Rockies this summer. So thank you, Wayne, and in your honor, as you know, the Boulder Rotary Club will be making a contribution of 100 doses of polio vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
You happy?
Yeah, very much so. Let's put that back so it's okay. That's for you. It's an innovation. You see that's an innovation?
Oh my gosh.
See that?
I didn't see that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.